My name is Elaina Pierce. I turned 18 with a viral magazine spread that landed me national modeling bookings, a family trust fund 7 figures deep, and Jude Carter, my childhood sweetheart who'd built a cult fanbase online for a love story. Back then, Jude's family empire imploded overnight. Both parents took their own lives, leaving him buried under millions in inherited debt, while every social contact vanished without a word. All my parents begged me to walk away, warned I'd sink my fortune bailing him out. I ignored them, signed over half my trust as startup capital, quit runway bookings to run his logistics firm alongside him, traded custom designer handbags for crumpled business spreadsheets stuffed in my tote, pulled all-nighters drafting client proposals beside him for 2 years straight until we bought back the Carter family downtown penthouse. I truly thought we'd crossed every hardship together and earned our permanent happy ending until the day Teresa Carter showed up on our doorstep clutching Jude's tailored wool blazer. I recognized her instantly, the quiet girl from our high school cafeteria everyone mocked as the $5 girl. Back then, Jude covered her lunch tab when she had zero cash. She'd scrub cafeteria tables after school to pay him back, and his friends roasted her nonstop for being a charity case. I'd always defended her, told the group to leave her alone, but never kept track of her after graduation. Her face paled the second she locked eyes with me, fingers twisting tight around the blazer fabric like she expected me to blow up on the spot before she could even get a greeting out. Before I could speak, Jude's footsteps sounded behind me, the front door swinging wider as he cut between us, tone sharp and defensive, zero warmth directed my way. She has a name. It's Teresa. He plucked the jacket out of her grasp with effortless familiarity, glanced her over with soft concern I hadn't seen him aim at me in months. Why'd you walk over in this rain? You've always been too stubborn to call, a ride no matter the weather. Teresa's cheeks flushed pink, head ducking down in a shy little smile, and I stood there watching them, my chest cold and hollow, finally starting to re-examine every tiny off moment I'd brushed off the past 3 months. I'd written off late office nights, blocked private calls, vague excuses as work stress, convinced Jude was just overwhelmed rebuilding his company. Now I saw every red flag stacked on top of each other. I kept my tone light, no screaming, no hysterics, just a dry, cutting remark to slice through her fragile act. That $5 lunch ticket you owed him all those years ago must have taken a lot of overtime to pay off, huh? Teresa's smile shattered completely, all soft bashfulness, melting into visible panic. That's not what this is like at all. I cut her off before she could craft a lie, holding up a hand to stop her flow of excuses. Save the explanation. I get it. You're here returning his coat after a late night at the office. Jude's jaw tightened hard, pulling Teresa to his side like he had to shield her from my supposed cruelty, then escorted her straight out the front door without a single word to me about what had just unfolded. That night I sat alone on our marble dining table and mapped every small betrayal I'd overlooked. Jude had hired Teresa as his personal executive assistant 2 months prior, without telling me, cleared out a spare private lounge in his downtown office, suite exclusively for her use, started staying there overnight repeatedly. The next afternoon, I stopped by his headquarters to drop off a critical merger contract he left at home, only to find Teresa navigating his locked filing cabinets blind in under 60 seconds, folding his dirty undershirts and dress socks like she owned the space, offering to personally deliver the signed paperwork to every regional warehouse manager to cut down Jude's travel hours. I stood in the office doorway, watching her move through a space with more domestic comfort than I claimed in the penthouse we owned together, and I knew this wasn't just a subordinate doing extra overtime favors. I stepped forward and set the thick manila folder flat on his desk, arms crossed over my chest, eyes locked on hers. I'll handle the deliveries myself. Thanks. This company was built on my capital. I know every regional contact better than anyone else on staff. Teresa's polite, helpful expression stiffened instantly, the fake gentle veneer cracking for half a second before she plastered on another harmless smile. I only wanted to lighten Jude's workload. I laughed quiet and sharp, cutting her off again. Funny how you're suddenly dead set on repaying every favor he's ever done you, years after that $5 lunch bill. The jab landed hard, her shoulders slumping, and I left the office without waiting for Jude to return, sending him a single text that evening laying out my boundary. Fire Teresa immediately, or I freeze all personal capital I'd injected into his firm. He texted back an hour later promising to reassign her to entry-level admin work with no private office access, a promise he broke within 72 hours. The first public blow-up hit 4 days later, when I received a frantic call from downtown police headquarters. Reporters and paparazzi swarmed the station entrance the second my black SUV pulled up, microphones shoved against my car windows before I even stepped out of the vehicle. Mrs. Carter, word is Jude got into a physical altercation with a male client over your assistant Teresa. Can you confirm there's romantic tension between them? Are the rumors true your marriage is falling apart over a former high school charity case? Do you plan to pull all your funding from Carter Logistics if Jude doesn't cut ties with her? I stepped out of the vehicle with a calm, practiced neutral smile, all camera flashes firing straight at my face, and spoke slowly for every recording device rolling. I have full faith in my husband's judgment, and I won't comment on internal company personnel matters right now. My public relations training from modeling years kicked in, letting me deflect every invasive question without revealing a shred of the chaos boiling underneath our marriage's curated public image. Once past the mob of journalists, I found Jude in the holding room, split lip and fresh bruising along his knuckles, still clinging tight to Teresa's trembling hand like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. He didn't notice I'd walked in until one of the uniformed officers cleared his throat, and he instantly ripped his palm away from hers like touching me would mean getting caught red-handed. We settled all witness statements and bail paperwork without a single private conversation on the drive back to the penthouse, silence thick between us until he broke the quiet halfway through the highway commute, staring down at his unlocked phone screen, scrolling through Teresa's panic-filled text messages nonstop. I watched his thumb fly across the screen, ordering a luxury rideshare service to drop her back at her apartment, and something in me snapped clean in two. I snatched his cell phone out of his grip and slammed it against the car's leather floor mat hard enough to crack the display glass, rage bubbling up after months of swallowed unease and ignored warning signs. My voice shook for the first time since Teresa showed up at our door, raw and unfiltered. You owe me a full, honest explanation for every late night, every locked office, every minute you've spent prioritizing her over our life together. Jude didn't glance my way once, gaze fixed on the shattered phone at his feet, tone flat and devoid of remorse. I don't want to lie to you anymore. Elaina, I have genuine feelings for Teresa. That single sentence detonated every memory I'd clung to of our loyal years together, every sacrifice I'd made to pull him out of ruin. My body shook violently, all composure gone, the polished public mask I wore daily crumbling to dust. Feelings? Physical feelings or emotional feelings, or both? Jude lifted his head to meet my eyes, expression empty of guilt, answering without hesitation. Both. A sharp, ringing slap landed across his cheek before I could register my own movement, my palm stinging from the force of the impact. I pulled my hand back fast, staring at him through blurred, hot tears. You make me sick to my stomach. We slept in separate master suite wings that night. The first night in 7 years we didn't share a bed, but the separation didn't end the torment. Sometime after 2 a.m. I woke up to find Jude standing at the foot of my mattress, a kitchen carving knife clutched tight in his grasp, his phone propped open on the dresser streaming a live video call with Teresa. He'd stayed on video chat with her for hours after our fight, too scared to hang up even for sleep. I stood barefoot facing him, voice cold and hollow. You swore once that whoever cheated on the other would pay with everything they owned. Jude's grip tightened on the knife's wooden handle, and before I could react, he drove the blade straight into his own thigh, thick red blood soaking through his tailored pajama trousers instantly. He didn't flinch away from the wound, eyes locked on mine, tone desperate to lock me into a binding compromise. I won't file for divorce, Elaina. You will remain Mrs. Carter forever. Whatever happens between Teresa and me, you hold the social title and all the company prestige. Just promise you won't seek retaliation against her for what's between us. That line hit me like concrete to the skull. He'd stopped himself to prove his devotion to Teresa, not me, begging me to leave his mistress untouched while I carried the weight of a broken marriage for appearance's sake. We spent hours at the hospital ER while Jude's leg wound was stitched closed. The moment nurses rolled him into a private recovery room, the lobby doors slammed open and Teresa dropped to her knees directly in my line of sight, hands clasped together like she was begging a judge for leniency. Her eyes were red-rimmed with manufactured sobs, every whimper loud enough for the whole waiting room to overhear. Elaina, all of this is my fault alone. Don't take your anger out on Jude. If you want to punish someone, punish me. Just leave him out of it. I stood flat-footed by the glass partition separating us from the ward, not a single muscle softening at her performance. Every person lingering in the waiting area twisted their heads to watch the dramatic display. Strangers whispered amongst themselves, already painting me as the cruel, jealous wife terrorizing the poor, vulnerable young assistant. Jude's mom had flown into town the second she heard about the fight, and she rushed over to pat Teresa's back, murmuring comfort like the girl was the wounded party instead of my husband's self-inflicted victim. This was the first major plot twist I pieced together in real time. That office brawl with the client hadn't been random misfortune. Teresa had intentionally provoked the man during a private conference to force Jude to step between them, fully aware the office lobby had security cameras and a steady stream of local reporters covering our firm's expansion that week. She'd calculated every detail to push Jude into public defense of her, cement their rumored affair in front of witnesses, and paint herself as a helpless damsel caught between a bitter wife and aggressive businessman. I didn't yell or storm over to yank her off the tile floor. I pulled out my work tablet, tapped open the encrypted folder where I'd been logging every suspicious incident involving her for the past 2 months, and held the screen out for Jude's mother to read. Timestamps, office security camera screenshots I'd requested via admin access, text logs Teresa had accidentally left logged into Jude's work desktop when she'd forgotten to sign out after an overnight shift. Look at the client meeting records from that day. I said, tone steady with zero emotion. Teresa scheduled the one-on-one closed-door talk with that client without any other staff present. Our company policy requires 2 employees minimum for private negotiations with male partners, but she bypassed HR to lock herself in there alone. She knew his history of verbal harassment toward female staff from prior incident reports on file, and she still requested an unsupervised meeting on purpose. Jude's mother's smile faded off her face instantly, her hand falling away from Teresa's shoulders as she scanned the typed timelines on the screen. Teresa's fake crying cut short, her gaze darting from the tablet to my face in a panic, all staged vulnerability evaporating in an instant. She scrambled to her feet, brushing dust off her slacks, the martyr act abandoned now that hard paperwork exposed her premeditated plan. That's just misinterpretation of scheduling notes. I didn't know he'd lash out at me. Cut the lies, I interrupted, scrolling to a saved security clip. The footage showed Teresa leaning into the client's personal space, making provocative offhand comments designed to rile him up 30 minutes before the altercation broke out. You spent 10 minutes baiting him to get a reaction, all to force Jude to fight for you in front of cameras. You wanted the whole city talking about the 2 of us fighting over him. Teresa's lips trembled. No retort she could manufacture to counter the video proof. Jude's mother stood frozen, unable to side with her anymore now the cold, hard evidence sat between us. I slid the tablet back into my bag and turned to walk into Jude's recovery room, leaving Teresa to stare at the floor with every stranger's judgmental gaze glued to her back. When I stepped inside, Jude was propped up on hospital pillows, his bandaged leg elevated on a foam wedge. He spotted me and reached out a hand, expecting me to come sit beside him like I always had after every crisis over the last 7 years. I didn't move an inch closer, stopping 3 feet from the edge of the hospital bed. Did you know she set up that office fight on purpose? I asked him plainly. Jude blinked slowly, the shock sinking in as he processed my words. He'd fully bought her victim narrative, never once questioning her version of events after the brawl. She wouldn't do something that calculated. She's too gentle for scheming stuff like that. That single sentence made it crystal clear to me exactly why he'd fallen for her act. After years building a brutal corporate empire alongside me, negotiating hostile takeovers, firing toxic staff, arguing board members down to bare minimum margins, he'd grown tired of my sharp, unyielding pragmatism. Teresa performed softness and helplessness 24/7, the exact opposite of a woman who could hold her own in a boardroom, and that contrast had hooked him deep. I understood his motivation fully now. After months of missing the obvious, Jude resented how capable I was. Every win we shared was credited partially to my trust fund and my business acumen, leaving him with a quiet inferiority complex he'd carried since his family's bankruptcy. With Teresa, he got to play the all-powerful savior, the man who rescued a poor, fragile girl from hardship, something he never felt like he could be with me, an equal partner who didn't need saving. I didn't waste breath arguing with him over Teresa's scheming. Instead, I pulled a printed copy of the prenuptial agreement I'd signed before marrying him and laid it across the plastic hospital tray beside his floor stand. Every clause highlighted in neon yellow ink, the ones I'd spent my lawyer cross-referencing over the last week. Our prenup states any capital I personally invested into Carter Logistics remains 100% my separate asset. All the penthouse furniture, the 2 commercial warehouses we purchased with my trust dividends, the luxury vehicles registered under my name. None of these are marital property you're entitled to claim if we separate. Jude's face paled drastically, his bandaged leg twitching as he shifted in the hospital bed. He'd assumed splitting assets would leave him with half of everything we'd built together, blind to the ironclad legal paperwork I'd had drafted before we tied the knot. You're seriously threatening to pull all funding and leave me with nothing over a misstep with Teresa? His voice rose with frustration, the mask of gentle husband slipping away to reveal the entitled resentment he'd hidden for years. I thought we built this life side by side, not you holding all the purse strings over my head to punish me for feeling something for another person. Side by side. I repeated, a bitter, hollow laugh escaping my throat. When your family went bankrupt, I undid half my 7-figure trust to cover your outstanding debts before we even signed a marriage license. I stepped down from international runway contracts to run your finance department 12 hours a day, skipped every fashion week to handle your client dinners, handed over complete creative control of the brand expansion to you without demanding a single majority share in exchange. I never once held my money over you to get my way, until you chose to bring another woman into our life and defend her manipulative plots against me. Jude's jaw tightened, no valid counterargument to my timeline of sacrifice. He'd grown so accustomed to my endless financial and emotional support that he'd stopped recognizing every choice I'd made to prioritize him above my own career and personal dreams. A nurse knocked on the door frame to deliver pain medication, breaking our tense standoff. I stepped back to let her tend his foreline, and while she busied herself adjusting his drip, I caught sight of his unlocked cell phone resting on the bedside table. He'd forgotten to lock the screen after our fight in the car earlier, and dozens of unread text notifications from Teresa flooded the display. This was my second critical breakthrough in uncovering the full scope of their affair, the second major layered plot twist unfolding right in front of me. I didn't hesitate to grab the device, tap into the message thread, and scroll back through months of unfiltered exchanges. Their conversations stretched back 6 full months, long before Teresa had even been hired as his assistant. She'd been sliding into his personal social media DMs while still working a minimum wage retail job, slowly planting seeds about her difficult living situation, framing herself as someone trapped in poverty who only needed his protection to escape hardship. Every message was carefully crafted to stroke his fragile ego, repeatedly praising him as her only hero in a cruel world while subtly painting me as cold, unfeeling, too busy with business to notice his loneliness. She'd even gone as far as drafting a script for the office altercation weeks in advance, typing out exactly how she'd provoke the difficult client to trigger a physical response, and sent the entire plan to Jude to read over before executing it. The proof was right there in black and white on his screen, no room for denial anymore. I held the phone out so Jude could see the message thread clear as day, his eyes widening in horror as he scanned her premeditated plan word for word. All his prior defense of her innocence crumbled instantly, every assumption he'd clung to about her pure, harmless nature shattering completely. I didn't realize she'd mapped out every single detail to manufacture that fight, he whispered, voice hoarse with quiet shock. I thought she was just reacting in the moment out of fear, not pre-planning the whole spectacle for attention. My chest ached with a strange mix of sorrow and cold detachment. I'd loved this man for more than a decade, stood beside him through the absolute lowest point of his life, yet he'd latched onto a stranger's manufactured sympathy just to feel superior to someone for once. The man I'd married no longer existed. The person sitting in that hospital bed was consumed by a crippling inferiority complex he'd let a calculating woman exploit for months on end. I set his phone back down on the table without touching any more of their private messages, not interested in reading every intimate exchange between them. I gathered more than enough concrete evidence to protect my assets and exit this marriage cleanly, if necessary. I'm not threatening anything yet, I told him flatly. I'm giving you 2 options. 1, terminate Teresa's employment permanently, cut all personal contact with her, attend couples counseling 3 times a week for 6 months, and sign a revised asset addendum to the prenup that codifies my full ownership of all capital I injected into your company. 2, I hire my divorce attorney first thing tomorrow morning, freeze every personal line of credit I've linked to Carter Logistics, and file for full separation immediately. Jude stared at the bandage wrapped tight around his thigh, his mind racing as he weighed the 2 choices laid out before him. Part of him wanted to cling to the validation Teresa gave him, while another part finally recognized how much he stood to lose if he pushed me to walk away entirely, his business, his penthouse, the stable life I'd built for him from the ashes of his family's ruin. Before he could voice a decision, the hospital room door creaked open again. Teresa slipped inside without being escorted by staff, tears freshly restaged on her face, a small paper bag clutched in her hands filled with what she claimed were homemade soup containers for Jude's recovery. She ignored my presence completely, walking straight to the bed and reaching for his uninjured hand, fully intending to act like I wasn't even in the room. "I brought something nourishing for you. You must be in so much pain right now," she cooed, leaning in far too close for a professional colleague's proximity. I stepped forward to block her path before she could touch him, crossing my arms over my chest, every word sharp enough to cut through her soft tone. "Before you get comfortable playing the devoted caretaker again, Jude, just read the text thread where you planned out that office brawl to create public drama between us. We have security footage, written proof of your scheme, and HR incident reports to back every detail up. Your little victim act doesn't hold water anymore." Teresa's manufactured tears dried up instantly, her expression hardening into open resentment. She dropped the soup bag onto the nightstand with a loud thud. No more soft-spoken gentleness for anyone in the room. "You're just bitter Jude cares about me more than he cares about you. You've spent years wrapped up in your fancy modeling gigs and big bank accounts. You never ask how he's really feeling inside. It's not my fault he found someone who listens to his insecurities instead of talking over every single one of his ideas." That retort laid bare her true core motive, the third critical plot twist I'd slowly been piecing together over weeks of observation. She wasn't just chasing Jude's money or social status. She'd identified his deep-seated inferiority complex early on and built her entire relationship with him around feeding that fragile ego, weaponizing his resentment of my success to drive a wedge between us. Jude shifted uncomfortably on the hospital bed, caught between the woman who'd rebuilt his empire and the woman who'd stroked his wounded pride for 6 months straight. He couldn't bring himself to defend Teresa's manipulative planning, yet he still couldn't fully let go of the emotional comfort she'd given him. I didn't wait around to watch him agonize over his choice any longer. I grabbed my tablet and the prenuptial paperwork off the tray, slung my tote bag over one shoulder, and headed for the exit door without a single backward glance. "Take all the time you need to pick between the two options I laid out," I tossed over my shoulder before stepping into the hallway. "I'll be back at noon tomorrow to hear your final answer. If you pick Teresa over our marriage, don't expect me to show any mercy when my attorney files all necessary court documents." As I pulled open the ward door to leave, I caught Teresa's venomous glare fixed on my back, her quiet mutter drifting through the air behind me. "You won't win this in the end. Jude will realize he doesn't need your wealth to be happy with me." I didn't bother turning around to respond. Her empty threats meant nothing when I held mountains of legal paperwork, video evidence, and written proof of every scheme she'd orchestrated to tear my marriage apart. I got home well past midnight, tossed my bag on the entryway bench, and collapsed onto the sectional couch without bothering to turn on the main lights. The penthouse felt too big, too quiet without the routine we'd shared for 7 years, every empty corner reminding me of how much I'd sacrificed just to build a life Jude claimed we both wanted. I'd barely pulled my laptop open to draft notes for my attorney when a notification pinged on my work inbox, an encrypted anonymous mail with no sender ID, no subject line, only a compressed photo attachment waiting to be unpacked. At first, I thought it was another tabloid leak or disgruntled client filing a petty complaint, something I dealt with weekly running a multi-million-dollar logistics firm alongside my old modeling consulting side gig. I dragged the zip file onto my desktop, double-clicked it, and froze the second the first image loaded on screen. The shots were all high-resolution street photography, taken every Friday evening over the past 4 months, outside a gated luxury downtown condo complex. The central figure in every frame was Teresa, her signature cheap canvas tote bag and faded denim jacket impossible to mistake. She'd hug a gray-haired middle-aged man at the building's private ballet stand each week, accept a thick white envelope from his hands, and follow him inside the residential tower for 3 or 4 hours before slipping out alone long after dark. Some snaps caught them sitting on the complex's outdoor patio sharing wine, their body language far more intimate than a random acquaintance or distant relative. One clear close-up captured him pressing a diamond stud earring into her palm as a gift, her face lighting up with genuine delight, the same soft, grateful smile she only pulled out for Jude to manipulate his ego. This was the third massive plot twist, and the biggest crack in every fabricated backstory Teresa had fed my husband for half a year. Every story she told Jude about her lonely, poverty-stricken single life was a complete lie. She'd never been scraping by on minimum wage alone, never lacked financial support, never had no one in the world to rely on besides him. She maintained a secret long-term arrangement with this wealthy older man while simultaneously worming her way into Jude's company and his bed, playing 2 men against each other to collect money, gifts, and emotional validation from both sides without either knowing the other existed. I scrolled through every photo file one by one, cataloging timestamps and the condo building's address printed on the gate's background signage. I jotted down every detail in a digital note. No rush to forward this new evidence to Jude yet. He still hadn't given me his choice from the hospital ultimatum, and I refused to hand him another smoking gun before he committed to either saving our marriage or letting it collapse entirely. I closed my laptop and headed to bed, knowing sleep would be thin. All I could cycle through in my head were her endless lies. The sad stories about unpaid rent, overdue utility bills, a sick mother she claimed couldn't afford medication, all crafted to make Jude pity her and shower her with cash bonuses, raises, and personal loans from his private account. Every dollar he'd slipped her was extra pocket money from her mysterious condo contact, and she'd hidden the double life perfectly to keep both men wrapped around her finger. The next day at noon sharp, I drove back to the hospital to get Jude's answer. When I walked into his recovery room, Teresa was still there, camped out in the guest chair beside his bed, a half-empty pot of her so-called homemade soup sitting on the nightstand. She didn't move when I entered, just stared straight ahead like I was invisible, determined to hold her ground and act as the primary person tending to him. Jude's expression was strained, his bandaged leg propped up, dark circles heavy under his eyes from a sleepless night tossing and turning over the two options I'd laid out for him. He waited for Teresa to step into the restroom down the hall before leaning forward, voice low and heavy with guilt, his first words immediately telling me exactly which choice he'd made. I can't cut Teresa off cold turkey, Elaina. It'd break her completely after everything she's been through. A hollow, bitter laugh bubbled out of me before I could hold it back. All those late nights drafting business plans, emptying my trust fund to erase his family's mountain of debt, stepping away from international runway opportunities, every sacrifice I'd laid on the line for us suddenly felt meaningless. Let me get this straight. You pick her over 7 years of shared struggle, every asset I built for this family, and the marriage we swore to uphold. Jude's jaw tightened, his gaze falling to his bandaged thigh instead of meeting my eyes. Classic coward's evasion, avoiding my unfiltered disappointment. I don't want to lose everything we built either. I just need space to ease her out gently, not fire her overnight and leave her with zero income. Can we compromise? I'll transfer her to a remote regional branch 3 hours away, limit our one-on-one meetings, go to counseling with you like you asked, just don't force me to cut all contact immediately. That was no compromise at all, only a loophole to keep his affair steady long distance, a half measure that solved none of our core conflict. I could read right through his vague proposal. He still craved the ego boost Teresa fed him, and he wasn't ready to surrender that validation entirely. I pulled my laptop from my bag, unlocked it, and rotated the screen so Jude could see the stack of anonymous photos from the condo complex front and center. I didn't yell or taunt him with the images, just sat silent, letting him scroll through each frame at his own pace, watching his face drain of all color as he realized every sob story she'd spun was manufactured to exploit him. His fingers trembled on the trackpad as he clicked through photo after photo, the envelope handoffs and expensive jewelry gifts jumping out at him one after another. She never told me about this man. She said she had no family, no one to help her pay rent. This contradicts every single thing she's ever said to me. Of course she didn't tell you. I replied flatly. She's running 2 separate relationships to pull resources from 2 wealthy men at once. You're not her only safety net. You're just the one who strokes her ego by treating her like a helpless charity case. That's why she went out of her way to provoke that office brawl. Why she spent 6 months feeding you lies about her hardship. She needs you wrapped around her finger to keep the cash and attention flowing on top of whatever that condo contact gives her. Jude stared blankly at the screen for a full minute, processing the layers of deceit stacked against Teresa, yet his lingering attachment still lingered in his tone. Maybe there's a simple explanation for this. Some distant uncle lending her money she didn't want to mention to me. I cut him off sharp, tired of watching him grasp at thin excuses for someone who'd manipulated him for months on end. An uncle wouldn't gift diamond earrings and weekly private condo visits for hours at a time. Stop making excuses for a woman who planned every interaction with you to benefit herself at the cost of our entire marriage and business. Teresa stepped back into the room mid-conversation, spotted the open laptop and the photos displayed front and center, and all the soft, gentle warmth she'd performed instantly vanished from her face. Panic flashed across her features, quickly replaced by sharp, defensive rage as she rushed over to slam the laptop shut before Jude could look at any more evidence. That's all fabricated garbage. Someone's paying a paparazzi to stalk me and plant fake photos to ruin my reputation. Elena's behind this whole smear campaign to drive a wedge between me and Jude. I leaned back against the wall, unfazed by her sudden screaming outburst. Stalked you. The anonymous sender sent me time-stamped footage spanning 4 months of weekly meetings. If these are edited fakes, bring the condo building security tapes to prove your innocence. We can take them straight to HR and the local magistrate for a formal defamation hearing. I'll even cover all legal fees if you're telling the truth. Teresa's mouth opened and closed, no counter-argument she could produce to disprove the photographic evidence. She knew full well the building's surveillance cameras captured every one of her weekly rendezvous with the older man, and bringing those tapes forward would bury every lie she told Jude permanently. Her rage melted into desperate, teary pleading, the victim mask sliding back into place as she latched onto Jude's hospital bed rail. Jude, don't listen to her twisted lies. She hates me because you finally see how lonely you are trapped in a marriage with someone who only cares about money and status. These photos are all set up to make you abandon me when I need you most. Jude glanced between her tear-streaked face and the closed laptop holding irrefutable proof of her double life, caught dead in the middle of 2 opposing narratives he no longer knew how to reconcile. He wanted to believe her manufactured vulnerability, yet the concrete photos broke every illusion she'd sold him for half a year. The internal war raging inside him was plain to see, but his core cowardice still won out. He couldn't bring himself to cut her loose entirely, even after learning she'd been deceiving him from day one. He turned to me, voice shaky and pleading, begging me to soften my ultimatum. Elaina, give me 30 days to sort this out with her. I'll talk to her about that man, ask her to explain everything honestly, reassign her out of headquarters like I promised, commit fully to couples therapy, just don't rush to file divorce papers right now. This was the 4th major plot twist. Jude's choice wasn't a binary pick between me or Teresa. He intended to straddle both worlds indefinitely, clinging to our stable shared fortune and the comfortable life we built while holding onto the ego validation Teresa supplied, fully blind to the fact I would never accept a half-hearted, lukewarm compromise that let his affair drag on for another month. I stood up straight, slinging my laptop bag over one shoulder, every ounce of residual hope I'd held for repairing our marriage evaporating completely in that single moment. I'd given him fair, clear terms multiple times, handed him mountains of proof of Teresa's manipulation and double life, and he still chose to delay taking meaningful action to protect our bond. There was nothing left to negotiate. 30 days of dragging this out isn't an option for me. Jude, MY offers expired effective immediately, tomorrow morning 9 a.m. My attorney will be filing full divorce paperwork, and I'll initiate legal proceedings to separate all my personal assets from Carter Logistics permanently. I'm also freezing every line of credit I've extended to the company for immediate review. His head shot up, panic flooding his features as he processed what I'd just said. Without my personal capital injections, the firm's ongoing expansion projects would collapse overnight, payrolls would be at risk, and the stable empire we'd built together would teeter on the brink of ruin. You can't do this. Pull your funding and file for divorce all before I've even had a chance to fix things with her. I gave you every chance to fix it. I replied evenly, no anger or shouting, just cold finality. I handed you multiple opportunities to pick our marriage over a manipulative woman who's played you for months, and you chose to stall and protect her instead of honoring the vows we exchanged. The consequences of that choice are yours to bear alone from here on out. Teresa let out a shrill sob, throwing herself against Jude's bed frame and grabbing his uninjured hand tightly, desperate to anchor him to her side before I left the ward. Don't let her do this to us. If the company fails, I'll have nowhere to go. You can't throw me out with no income just because some doctored photos turned your wife against me. I didn't spare either of them another glance as I turned toward the hospital room door, my decision fully locked in place. Every late night, every sacrificed career milestone, every dollar of my trust fund I'd poured into his life had been wasted on a man too wrapped up in his own fragile ego to recognize genuine loyalty when it stood right in front of him. Halfway to the exit, Jude called out my name, a broken, desperate sound echoing off the hospital walls. I paused in the doorway, but refused to turn back to face him. Wait, can we at least talk this over one more night before you call your lawyer? I shook my head once, flat and unyielding. There's nothing left to discuss. You made your priorities clear the second you refused to cut her off without delay. This conversation's finished for good. I pushed the ward door open and stepped out into the hospital hallway, the sound of Teresa's wailing and Jude's quiet, frustrated murmurs fading behind me. On the drive back to the penthouse, I dialed my divorce attorney's direct line and left a detailed voicemail outlining all evidence I'd collected. The office security footage, months of incriminating text logs, the 4 months of condo rendezvous photographs, and Jude's repeated refusal to terminate Teresa's employment despite her proven scheming.